You put up quite an interesting video the other day, Joe. It was called, and I quote, ANC secret gun grab exposed. So before I go on, could you explain a little bit about what that video is about? Because this is quite an important piece of, legislation that could definitely affect our own personal security as citizens.
Yeah, so in I think it was 2021, there were some amendments to the gun act. I forgot what the actual title of this act is, but it's basically an act that gives us the laws for guns, and one of the reasons why you can own a gun is for self-defense, a very important one. And the amendments want to take that away. So you no longer, they want to make it so that citizens cannot own a gun for self-defense. Caused a huge uproar in 2021. There was protesting, not violent protesting, just marching. I remember I was there. I was at the march. This was during COVID or lockdown. JP Smith came out, some other people, some important people like what's his name? Neil De Beer, and some other influential people. I remember Ian Cameron was also there, and we made a big noise, and we petitioned and we made our comments. I know the South African Gun Association or something like that was there. GOSA was there. A lot of people were there. It was successful in preventing the amendments from happening then. But now this has been an interesting story because deadlock had like a secret meeting with the ANC and other individuals. AfriForum found that out and sounded the alarm. And then shortly after that, we come out to find that the ANC is trying to push through these amendments. The same amendments that had over 118,000 submissions. Now, 118,000 submissions, I'm not saying that was all of them that denied. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the submissions myself. But you can imagine that a large majority probably didn't want this to happen, right? And it seems like the ANC is just ignoring those submissions. But certain individuals or organizations like AfriForum, Soccer are gearing up for the fight. And Free SA as well has a campaign open at the moment where you guys can go and comment. I know some people might think to themselves, like, wait, you just said that the government ignored them. Well, the government can't ignore. They can try and ignore, but they can't. And it is important for everybody to go and comment and leave your comment and fight again. Because the more noise, the more pressure we give, the more unlikely it is that they'll push through those amendments, because it's a very important thing here. I mean, there's other ridiculous things on these amendments, but I think the most important thing that should alarm everybody is the fact that you cannot get a gun for self-defense. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why on earth would a government want to take that away from the citizens? And I think the answer is pretty clear. We've seen attacks on the security industry as well. Those ridiculous amendments that say they can't use guns anymore. They can't use even tasers or rubber bullets and stuff like that, and essentially cripple the private security industry from being able to protect you. So now they want to take away your guns, or at least prevent you from having guns, and they want to take away security from you. Why? Why would they want to do that? Why? What on God's beautiful green earth, what good excuse could they have? And the only excuse I can come up with is the fact that the ANC is a very communist organization and government, and they will do whatever they can to make sure that they have power. This might come into play in the future when it's time for them to leave, and they're the ones with the guns and we are not. We've seen this play out before in many socialist/communist states. China. We've seen this play out in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and basically where a government wants ultimate control, to control the civilians as much as possible and take away as much rights as possible. So this is a very dangerous thing if the ANC pushes this through. Luckily, we have very robust, what do they called again? Very robust civil society groups. Again, as I mentioned,
Right.
AfriForum, Sakaliga, Free SA, Free Market Foundation, all these guys that are great at what they do, and they will litigate. They will fight this, that's for sure. But it's quite scary that that the ANC wants to do this. Some of you might be saying, "Oh, but it's the GNU now, and the DA should get involved." And the DA does what they always do. They'll put out a press release, and then they'll say that they'll fight it in court, and then we'll see if they actually do. But yeah, this is a very important
and I
thing.
do think it's
and
also
who knows?
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, Joe. I do also think it's important that people realize that unfortunately we've also got a pretty big political deadlock, in the sense that even if the DA normally goes through the courts and people kind of make that argument of, oh, it's like they're a bunch of Karens, they're just going through the court complaining, they don't actually do anything. But the reality is, when you're a 22% party, you generally can't. We saw it with the VAT hike debacle earlier this year, right? You saw the DA vote against the budget, even EFF and MK, and this is probably the first time I've ever seen those three parties agree on anything, right? But still, the little mini rats and mice parties still went with the ANC and got it over the line. So, yeah, sometimes you just aren't able to win the battle politically, right? And so that's why I think it's so important that you do have the civil society groups that you mentioned, as well as the court proceedings. You know, it's another form of checks and balances. But I think whoever does want to learn more about this, Joe, I'm going to post the link to your original video in the description box below so that they can check it out, because what we're seeing is incredibly alarming. And also what you said about Syrah, namely the private security issue. That's another huge problem, Joe, because, you know, we've spoken about this sort of government control, right? But we also need to remember that we live in a country with over 80 murders a day, right? And so when you have so many murders and you need private security, or just security in general, this is hugely problematic, because what we also need to remember is that the amount of active private security personnel is over triple the amount of police officers that we have in the country. So not only does that limit our self-defense, just in terms of, you know, whether the government tries some kind of an uprising, but it also just makes us more vulnerable to, well, violence, common crimes.